So after reaching enlightenment, after finding nirvana, the Buddha gave his first sermon. And today we call this sermon in Deer Park. He went back to that group of ascetics that he had been spending time with and gave his first sermon, taught them about enlightenment, and they became his disciples. So then, today we call this the forming of the Sangha. And what that is the word for a Buddhist community. So if you're a Buddhist, you're supposed to join in a community to help each other. So then, the Buddha went and taught for 45 years. I know it's a long time. He just traveled around, and anytime he sat down, then he would create followers. People came to him, spent his life teaching others. So what did he teach? The middle way, and we'll talk more about the rest of these real soon. The Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, as well as the 5 Precepts. Then when he was 80, the Buddha died. And what happened when he died is that the trees burst into bloom. There was fragrant incense fell from the sky, and you could hear music everywhere. And then what happened is that the Buddha entered into what's called parinirvana. Now, nirvana, right, is experienced when you are alive. Say that again. Nirvana is experienced when you are alive. You don't have to wait until after death to experience it. So it's different than the Christian concept of heaven, right? Where you experience beatitude, blessedness after death. Nirvana is experienced in this life. That's when you become enlightened. Now, parinirvana, what this means is that there's no more lives, right? You don't go into another life. That wheel of birth, life, death, and rebirth stops. So then what happened is that the Buddha didn't have another life. And a lot of people, when they hear this concept, they go, wow, why is that? And the reason is once you go through, countless lives, then you want to be at rest. You don't want to be caught up in that wheel. And this is what happened. So the Buddha entered parinirvana and then was at rest. Now, we'll go through and touch upon some of the different teachings of the Buddha. And one of those is what we call interdependent origination. And with interdependent origination, everything is connected. Everything affects everything else. Everything that is because things are. So, everything that came into existence did so because of other things. So, right, you think about, like graduates here at NETC, and you think, wow, look at the great things that I've done. Yeah, that's super great. But you have to remember is that, myself, right, me, I came, right, I was once a little baby, and I came from parents, right? And they came from parents and more parent, right? So if you think about the family tree, right? Just to think about your achievements, the great things that you've done, like graduating, that's really to take pride in that. It's a bad thing. It's a sign of ego, because, right, you are because of your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents, and you could keep going back and further back. So it's it's an act of pride to think that. If you think about the building, right, like this building here, Harris Hall. If we think about this building, right, it's not really a building. It's just a collection of bricks and mortar. And if we think about bricks and mortar, right, that's just clay and, all those different elements. And so what happens, what the Buddha was trying to get people to realize is that no thing has an identity or existence independent of other things. So we have this building because of simple things like sand, right? I'm here and you're here because of your parents, right? And your parents are here because of their parents, and on forth and on forth. Everything in the world is connected to everything else. We don't need to get hung up on the idea of self, that I am. Everything in the world is connected to everything else. And one of the things that the Buddha was trying to get people to realize is to stop putting yourself, your identity, at the center of the world. It's not www.meatthecenteroftheuniverse.com, right? If you go through life thinking that way, you won't reach nirvana, you won't become enlightened, you're going to be caught in the wheel of samsara, and you're going to have another life and another life after that. And yes, by the way, you have to take algebra in each one of those lives. So what you have to do now at this life is to realize everything is connected, right? To go through life and to think that I am the center of the universe, it's wrong. Everything is connected to everything else. Now, some more teachings of the Buddha. These are what the Buddha called the 3 marks of existence: impermanence, suffering, and no self. All things are always changing. All things are always changing. Nothing remains the same, including the self. Things are always becoming. Now, an easy way to think about impermanence, right? In the margin of the page, jot down your age. How old are you right now, right? Now, take 5 years off of that. So in other words, right, so jot down your age there. Now, compare those 2 ages. Have you grown? Have you matured? And the answer is certainly yes, right? And as we age, that's always true. We're always growing. We're always becoming something else. And if you don't think this is true, then you really don't have a sense of self-awareness. Because what life is about growth. Life is about becoming something new, right? And a good way to think about this is that if you're in a committed relationship, for example, marriage, this is a perfect way to think about impermanence. And a lot of people think about impermanence, this is a negative way of looking at the world, and it's not. It's a very truthful way of looking at the world. So say, for example, back to that example of marriage, right? Marriage goes through different phases, right? There's like that honeymoon phase, which is a few years. Then there's the child phase, right? Then, the phase when the children start to become teenagers, and then the kids move out of the house, right? So what happens with the marriage, it's a very impermanent thing. It's always becoming something else, right? So this is so key, so key. So the visual here, I don't know if you can tell on the slide here, but it's for impermanence, the idea, the visual that the Buddha gave was a river. So say, for example, if you go down to the PD River, the PD River is always impermanent. It's always moving. It's always changing. It's always becoming something else. So that's the first mark of existence. So I'll pick up with the second 2, and the next lecture.